Today, we're diving into one of the most influential books ever written, the Analects of Confucius. For thousands of years, this collection of ideas has shaped entire cultures. And honestly, the questions it asks are just as important today as they were 2,500 years ago. Because at its core, the Analects is wrestling with this one huge question that I think we all ask ourselves. How can we become better people, right? How do we live a good life, create a just society, and, really become fully human? This book is Confucius's answer. So let's explore his vision together. We're going to break it down into 5 key parts. First, we'll get to know Confucius, the man, and the unique book he left behind. Then we'll dive into the supreme virtue he called Ren, and how he put it into action through something called Li, or ritual. After that, we'll look at the ideal person, the junzi. And finally, we'll see how all this personal stuff scales up from the family all the way to running a country. Okay, so first things first. To really get the philosophy, you gotta understand the book itself and the very real, very human person who inspired it. See, the Analects isn't like a normal philosophy book with chapters and arguments laid out from A to B. It's more like a greatest hits album, just this collection of conversations, little bits of dialogue, and some killer one-liners that his students wrote down after he died. So it can feel a little disconnected at first, but when you really dig in, you start to see this incredibly powerful and unified vision for how to live a good life. And Confucius himself, he wasn't some perfect stone-faced sage. The book makes him feel like a real person. He could get impatient, he definitely had a sense of humor, and he would get really down when his ideals weren't being met. He absolutely adored his students, so much so that he openly sobbed when one of them passed away. And that's kind of the whole point for Confucius. Virtue isn't some abstract idea up in the clouds. It's something you practice and feel every single day. And that brings us to the absolute center of his universe, the one concept that everything else in his philosophy revolves around. And that concept is Ren. It gets translated in a lot of ways: humaneness, goodness, benevolence. But what it really means is the absolute peak of what a person can be. It's the fullest expression of our humanity. It's the goal we're all reaching for.
Now, what's so fascinating is how Confucius talks about Ren. When his students would ask him, "Master, what is Ren?" he'd give them all different answers. And he wasn't being inconsistent. He was being a brilliant teacher. He knew that the path to becoming a good person is different for everybody, so he gave each student the specific advice they needed to hear.
So if Ren is the goal, this internal state of complete goodness, how in the world do you actually get there? Well, for Confucius, the answer is in our everyday actions. It's a concept he called Li. Now, Li is often translated as ritual, and that word might make you think of big, stuffy ceremonies. And sure, that's part of it, but it's also so much more. It's the proper way to greet someone, the respectful way to share a meal, even how you dress. It's basically the whole web of social customs that gives our lives structure. But this isn't about just blindly following rules. Not at all. Confucius saw ritual as a kind of technology for becoming a better person. The idea is simple but powerful. By repeatedly performing these outward actions with real care and focus, we actually start to shape who we are on the inside. Basically, you are what you do, over and over again. And this shows you just how important the link is between your inner feelings and your outer actions. When you perform a ritual with genuine feeling, with Ren, it actually deepens that feeling and gives it meaning. But ritual without feeling? For Confucius, that was just an empty show. It's worthless. You have to have both working together to be a whole person. So, what do you call the person who actually pulls this off? The person who has that inner goodness and masters that outer practice? Well, Confucius had a name for this ideal person. This person is the junzi, the exemplary person or gentleman. And what's so radical about this idea, especially for his time, is that being a junzi has nothing to do with who your parents are or how much money you have. It is defined entirely by your moral character. It's an ideal that anyone, from a farmer to a king, can strive for. Throughout the book, Confucius is constantly comparing the junzi to what he calls the petty person. And just look at the difference here. The exemplary person thinks about what's right. The petty person thinks about what's profitable. The junzi is tough on themselves. The petty person is tough on everyone else. It's such a clear and powerful way to think about the kind of person you want to be. Now, for our last piece, we're going to see how this all connects. Because for Confucius, this isn't just about making yourself a better person in a vacuum. It's the fundamental building block of a good and healthy society.
It all starts at home, in the family. The idea is called shao, or filial piety, which is basically the love and respect you owe to your parents. Confucius said this is the root of all goodness. He saw the family as the first training ground for virtue. If you can't learn to be good to the people closest to you, how can you possibly be good to anyone else?
And this creates this amazing ripple effect. You start by cultivating virtue right there in your own family. That becomes the solid foundation for all your other relationships. And from there, that personal goodness just radiates outward, creating an ordered, harmonious society. The health of a nation is really just the health of its families, all scaled up. And this idea goes all the way to the top. A good ruler, in the Confucian view, doesn't lead with force or a massive book of complicated laws. A good ruler leads by their own moral example. He said, their virtue is like the wind, and the people are like the grass. The grass will always bend in the direction that the wind blows. When you get to the end of the Analects, you realize it doesn't give you some 10-step plan with a nice, neat conclusion. It really just presents a lifelong practice. The book itself literally ends mid-sentence almost, which is a beautiful reminder that this work is never finished. The project of becoming a better, more complete human being is never, ever done. So, I'll leave you with a question to think about. If becoming a better person is all about these small, repeated, intentional actions, what is one small ritual, one simple act of respect or loyalty or kindness that you can practice tomorrow to continue your own work of becoming human?